Chapter 10, Marriage and Communication in Intimate Relationships. Marriage relies on commitment, communication, and intimacy between partners. In this chapter, we will take a look at what is happening to marriage, how marriage rates are declining, and why. Then we'll take a look at contemporary marriages and the importance of negotiating marital roles. We'll examine how marriages change throughout the life course. And lastly, we'll discuss communication and how to deal with conflict. 61% of never married Americans say they want to marry, yet the marriage rates have decreased since the 1960s. So what is happening between people's attitudes and people's behavior? In 1960, 72% of all U.S. adults aged 18 and older were married. The rates decreased slowly during the next 5 decades. By 2011, 51% were married, a historic low. Now, marriage rates are expected to continue to decline because the number of newlyweds has been falling. Some researchers say that marriage is disappearing because the rates have plunged among some groups. Marriage rates vary with respect to race and educational level. For example, the marriage rates of blacks have been lower than those of whites, Latinos, and Asians since about 1970. Marriage rates vary by education in that people with college degrees have higher rates than those with less education. We see a growing marriage divide between those with and without college degrees. So, why are U.S. marriage rates falling? And here we see an illustration of the data showing that from 1960 to 2015, data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the line shows how marriage rates are decreasing. If we look at the percentage married by race and ethnicity, 58% of Asians are married, as compared to, if you look at to the right of the chart, 29% are black. So definitely a different percentage. 43% Latino, 52% white. So why are U.S. marriage rates falling? Attitudes about marriage are changing. In 2010, 39% of Americans said that marriage was becoming obsolete or outdated. And this belief is more common among younger generations than those, say, 50 and older, or those with less than a college degree, those who have never married and are single parents, and those who are cohabitating parents. Andrew Ch10, who is a sociologist who studies marriage in the family, divorce, stepfamilies, says, the question is not why fewer people marry, but why so many are still getting married. For some, singles get more tax breaks than married couples. During tough economic times, people are more likely to cohabit than to get married. The cohabitation and non-marital births are now much more socially acceptable. And women are no longer dependent on marriage for financial stability. They're more likely to be self-supporting. So these reasons are why marriage rates are falling. But marriage is certainly not disappearing, nor is it obsolete. Successful marriages are typically based on mutual respect, love, companionship, and commitment. When asked why did you decide to get married rather than just live together, in a national sample of American adults aged 18 and older, they responded based on cultural values and norms. Love and commitment was secondary. So the responses you see here in this table illustrate that. Wedding and pre-wedding rituals. Rituals is a Universal. Marriage is a critical rite of passage in most every culture. In the United States, you have the engagement, which is the formalization that a couple is deciding to marry. And it's usually symbolized with a ring. Next, you have bridal showers. For the bride, typically female friends and relatives shower the bride with gifts. Registries become quite popular for the couple to register for gifts that they need to set up their home, and then people who are invited to this bridal shower or any other of the pre-marriage festivities would buy gifts for the couple based on what's on the registry. There's also a bachelor party, typically for the groom. We've seen, these become really elaborate. They've, gone from, just a night out with the bridal parties, and now they've gone into like trips to Vegas and long weekends away. Sort of that last fling before the loss of freedom occurs, so to speak. So not only do you have bachelor parties, but now you have bachelorette parties where the females go out as well as the males. Prenuptial agreements are usually associated with the very wealthy, but they're becoming much more common, and a prenuptial agreement is typically a contract, and it provides legal protection for individuals' property. It has, sometimes includes, the children and finances and things like that. The wedding ceremony formalizes the marriage as a permanent bond. It is far less important than the actual marriage, but many couples and their families go into, a lot of debt, over just the wedding ceremony, in formalizing that commitment and relationship. When looking at statistics, there are websites called theknot.com, KNOT.com, to check out, some of the different aspects of planning a wedding and the wedding ceremony. Just to get an idea of the average cost of a wedding, this is data from 2016. The average wedding costs about $32,641. So weddings become quite expensive. Let's take a look at contemporary marriages. Married couples' relationships vary both in the United States and in other countries. So we have heterosexual marriage, we have same-sex marriage, and some cross-cultural variations. So married couples' relationships can vary from culture to culture. First, heterosexual marriages or opposite-sex marriages. Huber and Harroff's 5 types. They identified 5 types of marriage in a classic study of 400 couples who were upper middle class. Marital partners ranging in age from 35 to 55. Some were happy, some were not happy, but all endured or lasted. So first, in the conflict-habituated marriage, partners fight both verbally and physically, but they don't believe fighting is a reason for divorce. Instead, it's a way to solve problems. Conflict is usually minor, and those conflicts are seldom resolved. The devitalized marriage is when partners were deeply in love when they married, but as the years go by, they spend time together, but do so out of obligation rather than love. They raise their kids together, they entertain, they get along, so they don't want to divorce. One or both partners may be unhappy, but they're committed to staying married. In the passive congenial marriage, this is when the partners have low emotional investment in the marriage and few expectations of each other. These couples emphasize the practicality of the marriage over emotion. They're fairly independent and achieve satisfaction from other relationships, like with their children and their friends and their coworkers, maintaining separate activities and interests. In vital marriage, the they live, their lives are closely connected. So the partner's lives are closely connected. They spend a great deal of time together. They resolve conflicts through compromise and often make sacrifices for each other. When a disagreement occurs, it is over a specific issue and it's quickly resolved. Total marriage is similar to the vital marriage in that the partners participate in each other's lives at all levels and they have few areas of tension or unresolved hostility. They share many parts of their lives. They may work together or have the same friends and interests. This type of marriage is more encompassing, though, than the vital marriage. 80% of the marriages fell into the first three categories: the conflict habituated, the devitalized, and the passive congenial. Huber and Haroff called these utilitarian marriages, appeared based on convenience. The last two, the vital and the total, were called intrinsic marriages because the relationships appeared to be inherently rewarding. Now, this typology is helpful in showing the many types of marriages, but more recent research indicates that marriages are much more complex and varied. Also, these findings cannot be generalized because it was based on middle and upper class couples or those in therapy. So they are neither representative of the general U.S. population. Same-sex marriages or gay marriage. It's legally recognized in all 50 states, so the legally recognized marriage between two people of the same biological sex. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down parts of the Defense of Marriage Act of 1996 as unconstitutional. So this act defined marriage as the legal union between one man and one woman. So after a vote of 5-4 in June of 2015, the Supreme Court said that states cannot keep same-sex couples from marrying and must recognize these unions. Newly married same-sex couples tend to be older because they waited a long time to enter into this legal marriage. The number of legal same-sex marriages has grown rapidly. Lesbians are more likely than gay men to marry, and the number of legal same-sex marriages increased rapidly after the legalization. And this has both positive and negative experiences. There's still somewhat of discrimination that affects many same-sex couples. Next, we have some cross-cultural variations. Arranged or semi-arranged marriages are the norm worldwide. In some cultures, living apart together or LAT relationships exist for both economic or personal reasons, and the couples, live in separate homes. Like in China, rural husbands go to nearby cities for work while their wives take care of the farm. These living apart together marriages are different from commuter marriages where couples work in different cities and see each other on the weekends. Next, we're going to talk about marital roles. Establishing and negotiating these marital roles, establishing boundaries and learning more roles, and adapting to changing marital roles over time. Marital roles are specific ways that married couples define their behavior and structure their time. Partners experience change even if they have lived together before marriage. From the wedding day through the life course, married couples must establish marital roles and boundaries and adapt to changes. We often have these idealized and unrealistic images of marriage long before we meet our mates. Newly married partners must modify their expectations and learn to deal with reality, especially in the first year of marriage. In identity bargaining, partners negotiate adjustments to their new married roles, and these usually involves 3 steps. The first is that people have to identify with the roles they are performing. You're not son, daughter, sibling, and friend. People must learn to treat the partner as a spouse, share in the decisions, forgo activities with friends, making that spouse the priority. The two people must negotiate changes in their new roles. Failure to agree on who does what tasks, things like, who does the grocery shopping and who pays the bills. These things, if you don't agree on them in advance, they can lead to resentment and conflict. Defining marital roles helps spouses fulfill their expectations of each other and forges a strong relationship as a couple. When we marry, many still have strong ties to their parents, siblings, and other kin. So an important marital role is to shift one's primary loyalty from these family members to one's spouse. Shift from the family of orientation to the family of procreation. And need to establish boundaries that preserve that spousal bond. So if married couples don't establish boundaries, family bonds can result in resentments and conflict. Married couples also need to add more roles and new roles. If they're associating with one or both of the partner's friends, attending his or her religious services would be a new role. Joining new community organizations, and even being a parent. These would all be new roles for the couple. Also adapting to changes over time. Besides learning new and more roles, married couples must also adjust to changes throughout the life course. Work-family conflict is still a critical and unresolved issue. For working and middle-class families, taking care of children, the household increases stress. So another important change is caring for aging adults, or aging parents and relatives. Adult children also maintain their aging parents' homes. They run their errands and take time from work to drive their parents to medical appointments. Most children adapt to such pressures, but doing so may decrease their own marital satisfaction. That work-family conflict is really critical and an unresolved issue. Now, people perform different roles and learn new tasks as a marriage develops its own structure and identity from a developmental perspective. And these adjustments begin with the first year of marriage and continue until we die. So let's take a look at marriage changes throughout the life course. We're going to look at the early years of marriage, marriage and children, marriage in the midlife years, and marriage in later life. Now, in the early years, most couples are not ready for what happens after the wedding ceremony because most don't know each other as well as they should and don't attend premarital classes. So there's a settling in during the first year of marriage that involves basic adjustments. First, the couple takes on the new and unfamiliar married roles after the wedding. Couples then try to strike a balance between their relationships with their in-laws and their spouses. Because secondly, adjustment involves putting the marital relationship above others. If they had good role models in their own parents, the new couple will be successful in handling marital stress. Marital satisfaction decreases with financial problems and some other characteristics as well. So for example, a study that tracked 464 newlyweds over 4 years found those with the lowest marital satisfaction was due to certain personality traits that were brought to the marriage. Things like moodiness, being a worrier, being easily angered, physically and verbally abusive, and having low self-esteem. So these are certain personality traits. Also experiencing chronic stress, such as, poor relationships with family, in-laws, and friends, negative experiences at school and work, financial problems, and concerns about their own or their spouse's health. And lastly, they were angry and had contempt rather than a sense of humor, showing affection and being interested in discussing problems. So again, these are definitely things that would decrease marital satisfaction. Now, these are things that were probably or typically were there before the people got engaged, but they become even more prevalent or more prominent in that first year of marriage. And one of the most important functions of the family is to socialize children. In some countries, teens marry at a very early age and have children and are considered adults. In Western societies like the United States, adolescents are dependent on their parents until their late teens and even into their mid or late 20s. So even with the postponement of marriage, most couples spend much of their married life raising their children. When it comes to young children, socializing them takes enormous time and patience. As a result, marital satisfaction tends to decrease after a couple has children. Most parents experience more frequent conflicts and disagreements after having children than their child-free spouses or their counterparts. Adolescents, raising them can be very difficult. Adolescents today face more complicated lives than ever before. So even with dealing with all the usual developmental stuff, they may also have to deal with divorce or parental unemployment, violence and drugs in school and in neighborhoods. And as adolescents are seeking more independence and freedom, the potential for family stress also increases. Now, couples in the midlife years, between the ages of 45 and 65, must continually adapt to new conditions. And these are the most common. First are intergenerational ties. And these are often positive and supportive, but they can be irritating as well. A study found that parents report more intense tension than children did, especially when it came to children's job or finances or housekeeping habits. Both parents experience more conflict with daughters than sons. Daughters have closer relationships with them. Both sons and daughters felt more stress with their mothers than their fathers. Sometimes mothers can be a little more critical and give unwanted advice. Then there was the relationship with in-laws, the adjustment with relationship with in-laws. In-laws are an important part of a couple's relationship and can account for 43% of a couple's marital satisfaction. After a couple gets married, most of the conflict between married women and female in-laws are because of the following. Women play a central role in family relationships. When a new female enters the family after marriage, a mother will find she is less central in her son's life. Our culture doesn't delineate roles for in-laws. Asian and Middle Eastern culture shows deference to older women. And tension is compounded after the birth of a child. The younger new parent often wants control over their parenting and rejects grandparental intrusion. Then we have the adjustment to the empty nest syndrome. According to social scientists, this is when middle-aged parents become depressed and experience a lessened sense of well-being after children leave the home. Especially mothers who spend their lives bringing up children, they often feel empty and useless when kids leave the home. On the other hand, both parents report experiencing, freedom and ease of responsibility after this happens. Now, the boomerang generation, this recent phenomenon is when children who have left the nest come back. Parents try to launch their children into the adult world, but they often come back. And this can put a strain on both the parents and the children. But it can also have positive results, depending on the relationship, if it is good or not. They can return home because of the economy, lack of jobs, divorce, high cost of living. So there are a variety of reasons why young adults often come back. Now, older couples describe their marriage as the best years of their life. Yet there are still adjustments to be made. Our most challenging socialization occurs in these later years. First of all, there's adjustments to retirement. At this time, older couples report more marital happiness. Retirement brings more time to enjoy each other's company. Unresolved issues are few. Conflicts are settled. And you have the rewards of long-term friendship in their marriage partner. The biggest challenge faced by both sexes is physical decline. So we need to talk about health and well-being. A decline in health almost always affects marital quality. Whether or not a spouse needs long-term care, like need the care of a nursing facility or care in the home, the caregiver will undergo tremendous stress. If a spouse is widowed, they may have to develop new relationships. So power and communication issues affect marital quality as well throughout the life course, married or single, young or old. So the next topic we're going to talk about is communication. And here we have a retired couple having a chance to, look at the world from a new perspective. Now they're, have a new lease on life, oftentimes relatively healthy. So they're doing things together and activities together. So marriage in later life is often very reported as very joyful. Okay, so communication is a key to successful relationships. So we'll discuss why effective communication is important, what effective communication is, some communication problems, and power and conflict in relationships. Now, trouble communicating can lead to serious problems, including a gradual deterioration of a relationship. Hostile interactions, anger, criticism, rejection result in things like increased, depression, unhappiness, and even self-doubt. So here we see an illustration of some negative effects of communication problems in relationships. So you see the center circle is the effects of communication problems, and things like emotional withdrawal, superficial small talk, resentment, anger, arguments, lack of trust, feeling misunderstood, feeling invisible, feeling unloved, and having mood swings. So these illustrate some of negative effects of communication problems. Being able to listen well and express thoughts and feelings are critical to all close relationships and having effective communication. So one major communication goal of effective communication is to develop ways of interacting that are clear, non-judgmental, and non-punitive. A second goal is to resolve conflict without coercion or manipulation. Effective communication conveys what a person and others feel. It establishes trust and honesty to solve conflict. And an important first step is self-disclosure. Now, self-disclosure is when we tell another person about our thoughts and feelings, expecting them that they will communicate back. So that open communication will ultimately follow. Self-disclosure is beneficial under 4 conditions. The first is esteem support. Esteem support can reduce a person's anxiety about troubling events. So listening and being attentive is important here. Second, a listener may be able to offer informational support through advice and guidance. Disclosure can provide instrumental support if the listener offers concrete help, like grocery shopping or sharing childcare responsibilities. Even if a problem isn't easily resolved, the listener can provide motivational support. Validation is a showing of respect for a person who has a different opinion or point of view. So when you care about someone, you try to validate their feelings and reduce their emotional pain. Agree to disagree when necessary. Sometimes all we need to do is listen, understand why they are upset, and be supportive. Now, some common communication problems are things like not listening or responding to what your partner is saying. We often cross-complain. We offer counter proposals or stonewall, which means we just don't hear what they're saying. So they may, we're not really listening clearly. They're trying to open up to us and we're not responding to the issue at hand. And also, when communication problems occur, we're blaming or criticizing, nagging. Partners feel neglected or unappreciated when they're blamed or criticized or being nagged at. Scapegoating and aggression is another communication problem. Blaming others and avoiding honest communication. Being aggressive, insulting, really creates stress and anger. Another communication problem is repression and denial, keeping things bottled up, hoping it'll go away, or trying to rationalize a problem. Coercion or contempt is another communication problem. Throwing insults or name calling, forcing our opinions on others is another communication problem. Then there's the silent treatment. Because it can send, really mixed messages. Anger can build and the partner can get fed up. Now, power and conflict are normal and help shape communication patterns and decision making. Power, by definition, is the ability to exercise one's will over another. Sources of power include things like money, but it also can include things like love or access to information or a particular ability or talent. Now, conflict refers to the discrete, isolated disagreements as well as chronic relationship problems. All partners and families experience conflict, no matter how caring and supporting they are. So what are these things that some couples fight over, and how do we deal with this conflict? What do you think might be some of the major things couples fight about? Think about that. Well, here they are. So research shows that money, housework, fidelity and sex, children, and social media has been added to the list, are what couples typically fight about. And what's important is how do we deal with this conflict? So the first is money. And money arguments about money are pervasive and problematic and recurrent. They last longer and are more likely to lead to depressive behavior and physical aggression. So conflict arises when 51% of Americans don't talk about money before marriage. So, they can create definite problems. Combining accounts, hiding purchases, spending, going into debt. These are what can create problems. If you have a combined account and you're trying to hide purchases from your spouse, overspending and forcing yourselves to go into debt. So not discussing these finances before marriage is one of the causes of conflict, and spending money that the spouse doesn't know about. So it's really important to discuss finances before marriage. How will you handle that? Are you going to have separate accounts and then have a joint account where you will pay your monthly expenses and bills out of, household bills? But then if you want to go play a round of golf, you can go with your friends and play around a golf. Or if you want to buy a nice new handbag, you have your own account to spend that. So arguments about money tend to be pervasive, problematic, and recurrent if they're not, talked about in advance. Here are some of the purchases that spouses typically hide: clothing and accessories, food and dining, beauty and personal care items, gifts, alcohol, music, entertainment, and children's items is the lowest. But the most prevalent, the highest percent, are clothing and accessories. Now, these don't add up to 100 because you could have given multiple answers. It's an interesting table. Next item of conflict is housework. This is when couples can't agree on who should do what around the house, especially when both partners are employed. So this is when conflict can arise. 62% of couples surveyed say sharing the responsibility is important for a successful marriage. So disagreements about housework, household chores, and sharing in those tasks. Studies also have shown that couples who can work these issues out have higher satisfaction rates within their marriage. Fidelity and sex is the major reason why couples fight. Women see infidelity as a more serious problem than do men. Violations of trust and commitment include things like lying and betraying confidences, gossiping about each other's relatives also, definitely a violation of trust. Children can strengthen a relationship, but they can also create some strain and tension and conflict. Feeling stressed because of the demands that children can make is very common. A partner may have different philosophies on discipline, how to teach children, self-control, and different kinds of responsibilities that a child should have. Maybe one partner was expected to do household chores at a young age, and the other partner might have been, encouraged to play sports or dance class and not have to do household chores. So again, having different philosophies on child's early free time might be a source of conflict and strain. So children are especially likely to be a source of conflict in remarriages also. Stepchildren and blended families can also. So communicating about what those philosophies might be and opinions on discipline and how to negotiate those would be very beneficial. Next, we have social media, and it's a new and increasing source of conflict. One solution is for partners to ask for approval before posting or commenting and putting pictures up that include them. Almost nothing is private anymore, so being sure to respect your partner's wishes is very important. A lot of this can lead to irritation, embarrassment, having that miscommunication, and a bruised ego. So how do couples deal with conflict? Common conflict resolution strategies These are four techniques to help end conflict: accommodation, compromise, standoff, and withdrawal. So first, accommodation. This is when a person submits to the other. The conflict ends when one person agrees with or goes along with the other. Compromise is when the partners find a middle ground. So they compromise. Each must give a little to accept the compromise. A standoff is where partners drop the argument without resolving it. They agree to disagree and move on to other activities. There are no winners, no losers. The conflict basically ends in a draw. Withdrawal is when the disputant withdraws and he or she refuses to continue the argument by walking out or becoming silent. This is the least effective because there's no resolution of the conflict. Effective ways of handling conflict is where couples confront the problem. They will have better relationships in the long run. So handling conflict through negotiation and compromise offers the partners a better chance in developing more constructive ways to deal with the issues.